This episode of the podcast is brought to you by New Bloom Labs.
Hey cannabis producers, have you ever questioned your lab's potency reports? Or do you get frustrated with the long wait for your certificates of analysis? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Some analytic labs do more to frustrate their customers than serve them, but it doesn't have to be that way. Instead, you need to call New Bloom Labs. New Bloom Labs understands the cannabis industry and what's important to growers, processors, and manufacturers. They test plant material for potency monitoring, full panel analysis, and official state compliance testing. New Bloom Labs also tests final consumer products, which include edibles, topicals, beverages, cartridges, pre-rolls, and keef. Oh, and did I mention that they have the fastest turnaround time in the industry? That's right, New Bloom Labs delivers most test results in just one business day. So what are you waiting for? Give them a call today at 844-TEST-CBD or visit their website at newbloomlabs.com. Superior science, rapid results, that's New Bloom Labs. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Andrew Bish. He's the CEO at Hemp Harvest Works. Andrew Bish, how are you, man?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for making time for me and my audience. Really looking forward to diving deep into the world of industrial hemp. I know that on this podcast, it seems to be kind of, I hate to say it, but an afterthought because we're all so hyper focused on the cannabinoid therapeutic side of the house. But, when it comes to industrial hemp for material goods, and the applications there, it seems like it's endless, and we're not even at the forefront. We're in infancy stage there. So, Andrew, to kind of kick this conversation off, I know that your company, Hemp Harvest Works, which is part of Bish Enterprises, is a machinery sales business focused on bringing a line of equipment and ancillary services to the hemp market. So, why don't we start with what equipment is needed to grow hemp for fiber and herd, and what your company does to play a part in that?
Oh, great. And absolutely great question there. So when you look at growing for stock material, I often talk about growing for fiber, but the reality is fiber makes up maybe only 20 to 30% of any given stock of a hemp plant. So when you're growing for stock material, the equipment actually is fairly simple and straightforward. Most wheat producers have a healthy amount of the equipment necessary, which is going to be a tractor and a drill. And then when you get into harvesting, it's as simple as having, when I say it's as simple as, you'll need some sort of sickle mower, which actually isn't that common anymore, and the one piece that they might be missing. And then simple rake and a baler, and again, same tractor that you use for planting, you can use for growing stock material.
And is that I apologize in advance because again, this is kind of a new world to me still. And so what you're talking about with that equipment, is that the decortication process, or is that something different?
Oh, no. So that I was just talking about the equipment necessary to take care of the growing of the plant.
I
Uh,
see.
and once you get that out of the field, then we start walking into the next phase, which is decortication. And well, then we get into many other phases after the decortication part of it. So our company, we've been working in a couple different areas. From the farming aspect of things, we partner with some different groups that have some really neat planting equipment that we've helped put in customers' hands from outside of the United States. But internally, we've developed some harvesting equipment for cutting the fiber down. So I said that a sickle mower is actually a piece of equipment that's currently missing for most producers. And we produced a multi-height sickle mower that ultimately can cut down hemp that's 12 or 14 foot tall and cut it into 30-inch sections so that it can be easily baled. And the reason you'd want to do that is so that when you go into your decortication step next, it's easy to decorticate.
Got you. Okay. And from my understanding, Bish Enterprises, it doesn't solely focus on hemp, right? I mean, y'all focus on other agricultural crops. So what made you kind of make that transition into hemp?
So our core business has been in business since 1976. My grandfather started the company. Mother and father still own that company, and ultimately we've been working to solve unique problems for farmers since the beginning. And to me, the hemp industry is one of those unique problems. Uh, when you look at big agricultural manufacturers, they're hyper focused on commodities that do very, very large numbers of acres, in excess of 500,000 acres typically. We're not quite there with hemp. The big ag manufacturers aren't here to help those guys out. And so a company like ours, uh, we have the opportunity to help those types of producers. And I saw when we got into it the first year that there was a need, because I just didn't see anybody else out there that was interested, quite frankly. And so I, I guess I got bit by the hemp bug or whatever it was, and stuck in it, and just continued to work along the way and find our way through this industry.
Mhm. It definitely is an opportune time, and it positions your company uniquely, right? Because there's not a lot of competition out there. So like when you see the hemp industry and how it's kind of unfolding and the potential that it has, what are some challenges that you're seeing? Because you mentioned a lot of the big ag players haven't entered the space yet. So I mean, you touched on infrastructure being one, but what are some of the other challenges for entering the space right now, given that it's such in its infancy stage?
Well, I'll just start at the very, very basics. With most commodities that people grow, you go and you buy a seed that's been tested in various areas of the country and has known outputs. So it's very predictable. When you're dealing with hemp, we still haven't gotten that piece of the puzzle figured out. We still don't have genetics that are grown here in the United States, stable genetics for most regions. There's a couple states that have certified some varieties for grain and for fiber, but the reality is most states have not. And any place that does have a certified variety, they might be limited to one or two varieties, which just isn't sufficient. So that's where the problem starts. And then the problem continues to get more complicated after that.
And
We
is
just
that sorry to stop you there. So, but when you talk about the limited number of certified strains, like what exactly does that translate to the farmer? Like, how is that limiting for them?
Well, so they don't know where. First off, it's hard for them to know where to buy it and where to buy it reputably. And then if they do find somebody that they could buy it from, we they don't know that that variety is going to work well in their part of the world. They might be making a huge bet. Usually are making a huge bet that variety is going to grow and it's going to grow well. Because at the end of the day, the plant doesn't just need to grow; it needs to produce the amount of tonnage necessary for the farmer to make, positive cash flow.
Got you. Okay. Go ahead. Continue on the other challenges. Sorry.
No, it's a great question, and that is a major problem because and that speaks to the issue of not having those certified varieties. That the farmers constantly making these guesses. So
It's
let's say
the climate has a lot to do with this, what you're saying also, right? Because each strain kind of will respond differently to the soil and the climate in which it's growing in, and to get that particular yield that you're looking for, it's all kind of up in the air right now because none of that has been solidified due to the timing.
absolutely. There just wasn't the testing done on these varieties that needed to happen over the past 5 and 6 years. We got so focused on cannabinoids, and cannabinoids are awesome. I love cannabinoids, but we got so focused on cannabinoids that the entire industry, for the most part, just didn't put the attention on the grain and fiber varieties so that we could today be able to say, these 5 or 6 varieties, um, you know, grow large enough to produce revenue on a farm. So
Go ahead.
that's really tough. And like I said, the problem just gets worse from there because when you don't have standards on the very, very beginning side, you can imagine how more complicated that gets as we start to run things through equipment. which piece of equipment is going to work for this variety versus that variety when one grows 4 feet tall and the other variety is 14 feet tall. Those are not the same pieces of equipment for harvesting. And then you get into the processing, decortication. Some of these varieties lend themselves better to long line fiber. Some of them lend themselves better to short line fiber. Which ones do what well? Again, we still don't know. So you get into decortication, and there's a lot of inefficiency there because how do you tune your machine to work with a plant when the plant that you're going to get in 10 minutes is going to have a different plant structure because it was grown in a different way or a different variety or things like that. So the very beginning problem basically just gets worse and worse down the line and makes it harder to end up with a standard product.
Wow, I never thought of that challenge because I always kind of have simplified it from what I've heard echoed, like the infrastructure problem, right? There's not enough processing plants, but even like you said, it starts with that particular genetic, that strain, how it grows, how long it is, and that all determines the equipment in which you would separate the stock, the fiber from the herd, all that stuff, right? So it seems like to me, as we're in this trial and error phase to certify these different strains, like we're going to need to standardize like and cut off, like make a cap, right? Because the varieties could be endless, it seems like, and then that would dictate the equipment, and from there it just seems like it would be a big mess, right?
Yeah, ultimately, we're going to need to get to a point where we sort this out because when you look at the infrastructure problem is almost a direct result right now of the problem we're talking about. Because if you can't figure out what your standards are on the backside, obviously it's hard for you to connect with a buyer. The buyer and seller relationship becomes very, very complicated. The universities. This is where universities really. Oh, I apologize.
Oh,
I thought I shut that off.
no
We'll have to
worries,
bleed this one out. Let me turn this phone off.
no
Um,
worries.
okay, so I'll go back. The universities, this is where we really need the universities' help in the different states to be able to provide that data that the farmer needs. And I can tell you that this year, we're seeing a lot of activity from universities. I'm really excited at what things are going on with Texas A&M, with the University of Illinois, University of Michigan. We're lending some support in various ways with those institutions, as well as the University of Nebraska here in my home state.
Mm-hmm. So I know that the talk of industrial hemp, again, we mentioned it at the beginning. It's new. The 2018 Farm Bill passed, right, which made for illegal for mass cultivation of hemp. So while we're still in our infancy stage here in this country, are there any other countries that you would point to that is doing it well in terms of regulations and the way in which they go about their sales and whatnot?
Well, I think you can look at Canada as a good model on the grain side of things. They put together a good program for the farmers up there and made it easy for them to market their commodity. They Canada did not spend any time on the fiber markets and hasn't really developed that part of the industry. But I would say Canada is a good model on the grain side of things.
Gotcha.
When you look at the European Union and we start to look at those models, something people don't quite consider and also contributes to the issue that we have from an infrastructure standpoint. The countries over there are simply more efficient due to the subsidies that they're given. The European Union has mandated renewable resources be used in a variety of different industries, which has actually helped spur the hemp industry quite a bit. So the countries over there that are doing well, Finland, places like that, they really depend on those subsidies to make this work. But the reality is most farmers depend on subsidies to make any of their crops work. And in the United States, we're sincerely disadvantaged because we are not receiving subsidies like some farmers around the world are for the hemp plant.
And that's even with the 2018 Farm Bill passing, there's still no subsidies provided for the farmers for growing hemp. That's
No, not at this point. And a lot of that has to do with just not enough data to appropriately identify what those yield benchmarks should be. Again, going back to the predicament we talked about a little while ago, not having standard varieties leads to not having good data on those varieties, and then it's hard to predict and come up with those benchmarks. Although I will give when you look at the USDA, uh, they deserve heavy criticism for this. They've been instrumental in not collecting the data necessary to help the farmer today. Hopefully, what we see going forward with the USDA is a little bit more collaborative approach with hemp producers. But they spent since 2015, um, when ultimately the USDA decided to put together research projects, they've spent 6 years now not collecting data,
Hmm.
which is fascinating.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the USDA, along with the FDA, dragging their feet on the data, and of course the consumer oversight on the cannabinoid side is just frustrating for the industry as a whole. And speaking of the industry as a whole, when we talk about other challenges, one that is also just fascinating to me, and this is going to be an internal battle that I foresee happening within the industry in years to play out, is the zoning issues, right? I recently read an article about Humboldt County in California permanently banning hemp cultivation because of their concerns of hemp being too close to, a THC grow where you could potentially cross pollinate and ruin those feminized plants. So, what are your thoughts on that, and what are your predictions on kind of how we'll go about regulating the zoning issue?
Well, I think it's a very tough conversation to have, to be honest. Um, I understand and definitely can empathize with the concerns of a place like Humboldt County, where, quite frankly, there is a lot of flower that's grown, and in order for flower to be grown, you can't have pollen. So, keeping the hemp plant away, ultimately, when they say they don't want hemp grown, they're talking about they don't want pollen. And
Right.
I don't think that philosophy works throughout the most of the country. I think that there are some areas that maybe there are some exceptions made because they produce a particular product or commodity that you can't get elsewhere. And Humboldt County, I think, is one of those places. Palisade, Colorado. If you put up some sort of plant that caused the peaches not to grow anymore, I would think that people would be upset about that
Right.
as well. So I think that there are some very special places in the United States that there might need to be some protections for some of those flower growers. But on the whole, I don't think that is going to be necessary. For instance, look at Nebraska. Nebraska, we've got flower growers here. I've got more hemp in the road ditch than Colorado has for registered acres. It just grows wild out here and just grows everywhere. So you have pollen, and pollen's something that, quite honestly, many states have gotten used to. I advise that people that are flower growers definitely have some diligence to do in terms of who their neighbors are and what kind of crops are being grown around them. And I think we're seeing a lot of flower growers actually move to an indoor style grow to protect themselves from some of these issues.
Mhm.
So, like I said, I think it's a tough conversation because who gets the right to grow what? If both people own 40 acres of land and they're neighbors, how do you tell one of them they get to do one thing and the other one they don't get to do that? And I don't know how you pick those things.
You're gonna have to go to an old school paper rock scissors battle and just figure it out that way. No, but
Yeah.
I agree with you. I understand Humboldt County's reasoning for doing it. Not necessarily that I agree with the ban, but there's tradition there. There's legacy. So and it's one of the best places to grow in the country, if not the world, right? The Emerald Triangle. But I do agree with you when you say, like, that might not be the answer throughout the country, and we're gonna have to figure this out because there naturally is pollen in the air, right? And we're already dealing with that. So just curious though, because I know that that's something that's going to be more of an issue in years to come. So when we talked about the challenges with this, baby infancy industry right now, there's obviously tons of benefits, right, that we can expect from industrial hemp. So are you seeing any major investments move from like the cannabinoid space, cannabinoid therapeutics and extraction to fiber in 2021?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been a big change that we're starting to see this year. Is there is quite a bit of investment dollars going into it. It really started in 2020. That a lot of conversations started to get had. I mean, the reality was the hemp market really took a dive, and a lot of these people that are interested in investing in cannabis were still interested in investing in cannabis. So they started looking at where can they go with those dollars, and the fiber grain markets are quite honestly a great place to go. So we started seeing that last year, and it's escalated continuously this year. You know, we work and do decortication, and sell decortication equipment and different processing equipment for that. I can tell you the velocity of calls and interest, you know, today versus 12 months ago is, yeah, up probably 200 to 300%. And if you look at where it is from 12 months ago versus 24 months ago, you'll see even higher growth. So it's definitely on people's minds, and people are putting money there.
Hmm. I know that you live and breathe the machinery sales part of this industry. So, I mean, but like, would you say that it's primarily, people looking to invest in the machinery and like the infrastructure and processing, like we talked about, or is there other investments that you're seeing in terms of like other ancillary businesses within industrial hemp?
Oh yeah, we're seeing some interesting investments being made in terms of producing actual products. So there's a company out there called Hemp Home Styles that is producing hemp wood products for the kitchen, making little tables, other types of very unique wood products for the house. There's some paper companies that have started up that are creating some really unique paper products. There's a nice organization in South Carolina, a lady named Madison Sexton, that started a spinning and weaving operation with hemp. And so we're seeing quite a bit of interest in developing some products on the backside. I would say, though, that the largest amount of dollars is going directly into developing processing, such as decortication. So that first step of the process.
Right. No, that's encouraging to hear that, there is investments being made throughout the entire supply chain when it comes to industrial hemp. And it just kind of speaks to, again, the huge opportunity that the market presents. And so that kind of leads me to my next question, and that is the basic economics when it comes to producing hemp for flour, grain, fiber. I know we touch on flour when it comes to therapeutics, so let's remove that. But for those listening who are new to this world, Andrew, let's really talk about the economics and the benefits really when it comes to implementing hemp as a commodity crop.
Okay. So right now, well, the economics are definitely interesting. Not having enough processing and having very little processing plants, it's hard to it's hard to really understand price points when it comes to the fiber industry. But what I can tell you is that on average, farmers are getting about $150 per ton. So what does that mean? And how can we think about that? Well, realistically, a farmer that's going to grow a fiber only crop is going to probably put $500 to $600 into the ground total, all in on whatever that crop is. So if they're making $150 per ton, for instance, in order to get to almost a break-even point, they're going to have 4 tons of hemp growing. Now, when you get to 5 and 6, then we start to see profit. So economically, right now it's actually tough because we don't know all the varieties that are getting over 4 and 5 tons. When we start to look at the grain markets, however, the grain markets are very, very clear. We're seeing price points of about 55 cents per pound for conventional and $1.15 per pound for organic. And again, what does that mean? Well, I would say a producer in various parts of the country will produce between 800 and 1,200 pounds per acre. So for a lot of farmers, being able to bring in at the low end about $500 or $450 per acre, up to the high end of about $750 per acre for conventional grain, or up to a little over $1,000 per acre, potentially 1,250 or 1,350 per acre on organic grain. And those are really healthy numbers there that farmers can work with, and are producing better results than what you're seeing from corn and soybean markets right now.
So grain, it sounds like grain is more stable, fiber not so much, because again, going back to your earlier comments about just genetics and the strains haven't really, we haven't got there to where they've been. What's the word, the term? The strains haven't been certified
Oh,
or
yeah, they haven't been certified or stabilized.
stabilized is the word. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So,
But I'll tell you, even with the grain markets, there's some real hazards in front of us. The grain market currently has somewhat of a cap because we're only allowed to feed it to humans in the United States. You can't feed it to a cat or a dog or a cow or a chicken yet. And until we are able to feed it to all of those different animals, the market is really still somewhat of a closed market. It's not truly a wide open market. And that's going to continue to keep revenue down for producers and actually create higher costs for consumers. So, and because of that, it makes it more difficult to do dual cropping of growing for grain and fiber in that particular scenario. So what we have to do, and I happen to be the vice president of an organization called the Hemp Coalition, and what we do is we actually aggregate information from universities and then work to submit applications for hemp as a food ingredient to the FDA. This year we introduced, or we applied for chickens, egg-laying chickens, actually, and hopefully we'll get that approved. But until we can get all of the different animals approved, we're going to have an issue in terms of offload with that grain.
so that those applications for grain, hemp grain used for livestock feed has to go through the FDA, not the USDA.
Yeah, so that's all done through the FDA. Yeah, and the Center for Veterinary Medicine. So basically, an application gets submitted to the Center for Veterinary Medicine. They do a study, they review all the studies and make a recommendation to the FDA. The FDA ultimately has the authority to green light it as an animal food ingredient at that point.
Got you. So, and right currently, because those applications haven't been approved, and we are kind of hamstrung with not being able to feed livestock this hemp grain, we're kind of bottlenecked, right? Because we can only sell it to consumers.
Exactly, and that's why we're, the organization that I belong to is working very hard to raise funds to submit these applications, because each application actually is about $250,000 by the time that we're done. And when you look at what you have to do, I mentioned that we submitted an application for egg-laying chickens. Well, that's different than boilers. So if you want to eat the meat of the chicken, we have to submit a different application for that. And then you get into, I think there's about 4 or 5 different categories of chickens. You get into 3 or 4 categories of almost every single animal.
So that's 3 or 4. So that's 250,000 times 3 or 4, right?
Yeah, and then you just go to another animal and another animal and another animal, and the reality is every single test that we do shows the same result on the animals. You see higher amounts of omega-3 fatty acids. You don't see THC. You're typically not seeing transference of cannabinoid material. So we're not seeing any difference in the testing, but it's a bunch of hoops that have to be jumped through.
hoops, and man, the FDA's and they're just cashing in. It sounds like, I mean, they're decompartmentalizing parts of the chicken and then charging for each one of those parts at full price. Wow.
That's correct. And the whole time, the consumers actually are being negatively impacted because the reality is if you feed, it's true about every animal, but if you feed a chicken about 20% hemp seed in their diet, added into what they're currently feeding now, you'll see healthier chickens that happen to weigh more and are producing higher omega-3 fatty acids, which ultimately are better for consumers and better for the people that are eating the product.
Right, right. And not to mention, before the 1930s, we had hemp steeds where we literally used the hemp crop for everything, including feeding livestock, right? So it's not like
Yeah.
this is like a new idea that we're trying to introduce here. We've done this for hundreds of thousands of years already. So,
Yeah, and ultimately, hemp is deserving of what you call grass status, which would be generally recognized as safe, because it was used uh, prior to the date in which standards came out and new food ingredients had to start being introduced. But in order to do that, we're going to need someone with enough power in the government to make this whole situation easier. And there's people out there that can do that. We just have to continue to educate.
education's key. Yeah, no, absolutely. Patience also, right?
Yeah, if you work in this industry, you better have a lot of patience.
Right, right. Yep. I'm quickly learning that for sure. So, Andrew, I want to ask you. I know that your company, Bish Enterprises, is based in Nebraska, right?
That's right.
Um, but tell me, like, from your perspective, what states are uniquely positioned to grow industrial hemp for fiber and herd?
So I will say Nebraska is likely one of the best states for that. Nebraska has the most farmable acres of any state in the union, actually. But it's going to be most of the states in the Midwest. So when you look at northern Texas, would call it West Texas. I call it North Texas, but West Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, eastern Colorado, North and South Dakota, and eastern Wyoming is going to be the real prime area for grain and fiber varieties of hemp.
What about New York? I know it gets cold out there, but what are your thoughts on New York hemp?
I think so. New York is unique. They've got an excellent growing climate, actually. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for hemp to grow in New York. I also think that New York has more crops that can grow in New York. One of the challenges when you look at the states that I just mentioned, there's not a lot of option in terms of variety that you can grow. It's fairly limited. Where New York typically has a climate that's more suitable to growing much more variety of plants, vegetables, things like that. So yes, New York absolutely has some opportunity, but it has some advantages that the Midwest doesn't have in terms of other rotational crops.
Right, right. Now that makes sense. Couple more questions for you. So I wanted to just get your thoughts on how you see technology and digital marketing shaping the industrial hemp industry.
Well, I think the biggest advantage technology can give us is likely to develop a system of transparency so that we really better understand. We don't have good tracking in the industry, whether it be cannabinoids or fiber or anything like that. And technology can help bring systems together that help make that easier on the consumer side of things because we just don't have all those dots connected today. I would say that's the place in which the industry could benefit the most.
Well said. NOCO was this past weekend. Today's March 31st. Did you I know that you're a big part of that, event every year. Did you end up going?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't miss it at all. It costs too much money to miss. So, but it was an absolutely positive experience. It wasn't as big as we saw a couple years ago, but we didn't have COVID a couple years ago either.
Right.
But I was happy to see the optimism, and that's really while attendance was not definitely not what I wanted it to be. the attitude was exactly what I was looking for. We saw tremendous enthusiasm and optimism, and we just didn't see that last year. So it was nice to see that come back into the industry.
That's great. Any key takeaways from the event that you want to share?
I can't think of any one thing that stands out outside of just the tremendous positivity that I got from everybody, and general sense of warmth and community that I've missed, as we haven't been able to experience that for so long.
Yeah. I mean, while the pandemic has been just a burden and a stress on everyone, right? There have been some good things that have come out of it, and one of which is just kind of that shot in the arm kite type energy effect that is given the cannabis industry. We're energized and we feel kind of ready to go now that we've been deemed essential, and there's more spotlight within the industry. So it's
Yeah,
good to
it's
hear.
been an exciting time for cannabis. I will agree. The past few years, and of course, I've been involved in the industry for about 6 years, and it's been the most interesting thing I've done in my life, and I'm glad every day to be a part of this.
Awesome. Well, yeah, no, I'm glad you had a great time at Noku, and shout out to Morris Beagle. I know that that's his event, and he's been on the podcast before. He's a really great guy. So, and a huge advocate of the hemp industry as well, just like yourself, Andrew. So, as we wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we go?
You know, I feel pretty good about what we said. I don't have any words of inspiration at the end of this, I guess, other than I just want to thank everybody for listening to what I had to say. And I will add that, not to be a shill for the Hemp Feed Coalition, but I believe that it helps the entire cannabis industry as a whole. So please become a member of the Hemp Feed Coalition. It's only $100. Go to hempfeedcoalition.org and support. If you support cannabis, support what we're doing, it makes a difference.
Awesome. Well, hey, we appreciate all your work, Andrew, in pushing the industrial hemp industry forward. And yeah, I'd love to have you back on in the near future as things continue to evolve.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes. And thank you all for listening. Bye.